I always thought the quiet hours were mine. The dead of night, when the house was still, the air heavy with sleep, and even the walls seemed to breathe in peace. But that night, at exactly 12:41 a.m., I woke up thirsty, and everything I thought I knew collapsed with one sentence. Yes, sweetheart, he's got no idea. Tomorrow night, just make sure it looks messy. I stopped moving, one hand on the doorknob, the other holding my empty glass. Her voice came low, deliberate, coiled with intention. My wife, the woman I married 3 years ago, the woman I thought I knew down to the scar behind her left knee. She was standing in the kitchen, back turned, phone to her ear, one hand twisting the cord of her robe. I heard her laugh, soft, almost nervous. And then, I'll leave the door unlocked at 10. Make it quick. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. I stepped back before the creak of the floorboard could give me away. No anger, no panic. I just set the glass down on the hallway table and walked toward the garage like I was going out for a smoke. She didn't see me. She didn't hear the door close behind me. My name is Jack Brennan. I'm 46 years old, and I serve as Chief Security Strategist for a global infrastructure firm called Valence Operations Group. It's a cover. My real employer is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Counterintelligence Division, Domestic Operatives Unit. For the past 15 years, I've been embedded in various civilian roles, tracking threats inside U.S. borders, tech theft, cartel infiltration, foreign blackmail networks. Before that, I spent a decade in the Marines, scout sniper, deployed in 5 theaters, honorably discharged, then quietly recruited. I've seen good men lose their lives because they trusted the wrong person. I've looked through scopes at enemies who smiled the day before and slit throats the day after. And I've learned, beyond all doubt, that the first rule of survival isn't strength or speed. It's silence. Let them talk. Let them think. Let them hang themselves with their own rope. The garage was pitch black until I keyed in the sequence on the side panel. The overhead bulb flickered once, then stabilized. The room looked like any suburban storage space. Shelves of paint cans, a workbench, a toolbox. But behind a false wall, accessed by pressing the right 2 fingers into the cutout behind the breaker box, was the thing she never knew existed. The door clicked open. I stepped into a 12 by 12 control room, reinforced walls, soundproofing, cold steel desk with 4 monitors, fiber-lined uplinks, 3 dedicated signal scramblers, and a array of data backups. My sanctuary. I sat, breathed, then brought up the house's hidden audio feed. I rewired it myself 2 years ago. Small ceramic mics, embedded inside light fixtures, vent grills, even the baseboards. I scrubbed backward 10 minutes and let it play again. Yes, sweetheart, he's got no idea. I closed my eyes, let it wash over me. Not the words, those were irrelevant. It was the tone, the one I'd heard in interrogation rooms, the one liars wear like perfume, nervous confidence, giddy malice. She ended the call. I switched feeds. The kitchen camera caught her fingers flying across her phone. I copied the number in real time and dumped it into a burner trace. The results came back fast. It was a pay-as-you-go, registered 3 towns over, with location pings bouncing off towers commonly used by known affiliates of the Najera cartel. Southbound connections, trafficking and enforcement networks. I'd seen their work. I'd cleaned their work. I watched her pour herself wine, sit on the couch, and smile. That smile. God, it used to melt me. Now it made my hands go cold. She thought I was just a man with a desk job. A man who brought home takeout and forgot anniversaries and paid the bills on time. She didn't know the safe under the garage floor held a case with custom M118 rounds and a collapsible rifle I used in Jordan. She didn't know that every room in this house could be turned into a tactical trap in under 2 hours. She didn't know I'd been mapping every entry, every exit, every sightline since we bought the place. She didn't know I'd been waiting. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit. You spend 30 years walking among enemies. You learn to count footsteps and angles, even while brushing your teeth. You don't just stop because you got a mortgage. I watched her finish her wine and head to bed. She didn't lock the back door. Didn't need to. They were coming tomorrow. She thought she'd cleared the path. She'd made one mistake. She thought she'd married a civilian. I clicked open the safe, pulled out the case, opened it. The rifle lay there like an old friend. I began assembling it, each piece sliding into place with the kind of precision you don't forget. I whispered to the empty room, "Make it messy, huh?" She wanted a mess. She was about to get one. They say the worst betrayals don't come with screaming. They come with silence. And when it happens, you don't hear your heart break. You just hear the room get quieter. Too quiet. The night after, I heard her whisper that little murder plot into the phone. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I didn't drink. I sat in my surveillance room and remembered the jungle. Specifically the Korengal Valley, 2006. It was the kind of place that never went still. Even the trees breathed wrong. The heat had weight. You'd sit in the same position for hours, not blinking, not twitching, not thinking. Just listening, waiting. And then, a shape would move, just enough to justify a trigger pull. I remember the first time I waited too long. It was the same day I watched 2 of our guys bleed out in the mud, because I hesitated. It doesn't take a bullet to kill you out there. Just a second of doubt. I made a promise to myself that day. Never wait to be betrayed. I carried that with me into the bureau. The ghosts came too. I just got better at naming them. Different uniforms, different masks, but the same dead eyes. When I met her, I was working a cover job as a private contractor for Valence Ops, embedded under the Bureau's shadow network. She was a systems analyst, hired to redesign our logistics interface. Sharp, warm, liked her coffee burnt and black. Told me her last boyfriend faked his way into her life with some crypto scam, so trust didn't come easy. I should have seen the irony then, but I was tired. Tired of the game, of the lies, of the masks. She made me feel like I could finally hang my rifle on the wall and leave it there. She even laughed the first time she saw the scar above my collarbone. Said it looked like a Nike swoosh. "Just do it," she whispered, then kissed it. It felt like surrender. I didn't realize it was mine, but little things started stacking. The fake work calls where her voice dropped too low. The weekends at her sister's that suddenly became emergency retreats. The questions about my retirement fund, my passwords. I kept making excuses for her, blaming my own trauma. We see shadows where there aren't any, right? Number. Sometimes the shadow is real. At 4:12 a.m., I pulled out 2 burners, one from the wall vent, the other from the attic. No digital trail, no fingerprint, each coded to a separate dummy persona. I messaged 2 of my oldest bureau contacts. I didn't explain the whole thing, just enough. Possible breach, asset compromised, standby protocol advised. Key phrase, Nightingale's off her perch. Within 6 minutes, I got confirmation. 2 dead drops were ready, one in an alley trash can off 8th and Porter, the other behind a vending machine in the gym where I trained. That would trigger the next level if anything happened to me. I scrubbed both phones, crushed their SIMs, and dumped the remains into separate trash bags, spread across 3 blocks the next morning. No loose ends. The house was next. I spent years pretending to be the husband who couldn't fix a leaky faucet. That's what made it easy to install every piece of hardware without raising an eyebrow. The garage had a pressure trigger tied to the motion sensors on both side entries. The back patio door was set with a silent alert the second it opened. I set up 2 wireless cams inside the gutters, each feeding into a private loop I could watch from my wristwatch if needed. It looked like I was watering plants. I was planting landmines. By the time the sun rose, the house was no longer a home. It was a perimeter. I made myself a protein shake I didn't drink and opened the safe. Inside, the long case hadn't been touched in almost 2 years. Not because I forgot it, because I hoped I wouldn't need it again. I set it on the table and clicked the latches. The rifle looked back at me like it never left. M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Custom scope, subsonic rounds, suppressed barrel. The kind of thing they stopped letting you take on planes unless you had a star-spangled badge and a signed confession from Congress. I checked the chamber. Clean. I loaded the first round. Hand machine, tipped with hollow point. Engraved just under the shell. K-21, short for Kill Zone 21. Not bureau issue. My own. Then I spoke. Not to her. Not to anyone. Just to the ghosts in the room. Tomorrow, sweetheart, I whispered. Let's make it messy. And then I smiled. She thought she'd opened the door for killers. She didn't know I'd already opened the door for them. The scent of seared ribeye hit me before I even made it into the kitchen. Butter, garlic, a hint of rosemary. The works. She'd gone all out. I stepped into the room and saw her there, apron on, hair pinned up like she hadn't worn it in months, smiling like the past 24 hours hadn't happened. There he is, she said. Dinner's almost ready. I thought we deserved a nice night in. She pulled the cast iron off the burner and plated the steak like she'd done it for a magazine shoot. Candlelight flickered in the center of the table. The expensive wine, the bottle we were supposed to save for our anniversary, was already open and breathing. It was a performance, and it was damn convincing. I sat across from her, watching her movements, too smooth, too controlled. She poured the wine, handed me my glass, and her fingers brushed mine like she was still trying to play the part of devoted wife. I smiled. She raised her glass. To us. I raised mine. To tomorrow. She froze. It was slight, no more than a blink and a flicker in her jaw, but I caught it. I always catch it. Then she laughed lightly, too lightly, and said, "You're not going to tell me what that means, are you?" I just cut into the steak. Not yet. She watched me for a few seconds, then shifted gears. Talked about the neighbor's dog, the weather, a new show she wanted us to binge. I nodded along, said little. Every word that came out of her mouth sounded like static in my ears. This wasn't my wife. This was a shell, one perfectly molded to keep me blind, quiet, soft. After dinner, she stood up and said she needed to take a call. My sister, she added, with a little roll of her eyes. She's having another meltdown. I leaned back in the chair. Take your time. She grabbed her coat, gave me a smile I used to believe in, and walked out the front door. I waited 6 seconds, then tapped my watch face twice. The garage drone, disguised inside a lawn care bin, activated and lifted into the sky, silently tracking her GPS tag. I'd planted it in the lining of her coat last year. Not because I suspected her, because I didn't trust comfort. The screen lit up. She wasn't heading toward her sister's neighborhood. She took a left past the highway ramp, then another, onto an unlit service road that eventually spilled out into a dead end at an old, unused construction site just west of the industrial district. The drone feed caught her pulling up to a white van. There were 2 others already there. As she stepped out, 9 more figures emerged from the shadows. 10 men total, full tactical gear, black boots, gloves, night vision strapped to helmets. Not amateurs, not local muscle. This was paramilitary efficiency. Quiet, coordinated, deliberate. And then she kissed one of them. Not a peck, Not a decoy. It was long, familiar, intimate. My chest didn't crack. My hands didn't shake. It was something colder than rage, something older than heartbreak. It was clarity. The woman I loved had been dead a long time. Maybe she never existed. What stood in my kitchen earlier was just her skin, draped over something else entirely. Something transactional, something lethal. I killed the drone feed and stood up. No words, no ceremony, just action. I opened the gun case again and slid the rifle into the rucksack. Disassembled, smooth, practiced. Grabbed 2 extra mags, the curved combat knife, and a low-lumen headlamp. Slipped out the side gate and into the tree line behind the property, the way I'd walked 100 times when I needed to clear my head. I moved quickly but low, cutting through suburban streets and ducking fences until the houses thinned and the trees thickened. The city was still humming behind me. But out here, just past the gravel quarry, it was all wind and rusted fences. I found the edge of the property and dropped to a knee behind a stretch of brush. From here, I could see the van, the gearbags, the men loading suppressed rifles and distributing earpieces. She was still there, now pointing to a printed blueprint. My house. She was showing them the entry routes, the motion sensor zones, the location of the safe in the garage. She even marked where I usually dropped my phone on the kitchen counter before bed. She never noticed that the blueprint had been doctored 2 weeks ago. The safe she pointed to was a dummy. The blind spots had reverse IR triggers that would flash every heat signature back to me in real time. She didn't know the house she lived in was never hers to map. I watched her laugh again, watched one of the men slap her on the back like she was just one of the crew. Maybe she was. I adjusted my pack, rolled my shoulders, and pulled my hood up. The moon was out, but I stayed in the tree line, invisible to anyone not looking for ghosts. Helmand taught me how to vanish, how to move between wind and wire, between heartbeat and breath. And tonight, I wasn't going home. I was walking straight into the kill box, with my finger already on the trigger. I was already there when they arrived, flat on my stomach on the second floor of the adjacent concrete shell that used to be part of the site's old office wing. From here, I had full visual on the entryway, north and west flanks, and a partial slice of the main floor interior. My rifle was settled, elevation adjusted, wind 0. Every trap was in place, every angle accounted for. They rolled in around 9:43 p.m., like a bunch of frat boys arriving at a bonfire, laughing, elbows. One of them even cracked open a beer. Sloppy, arrogant. They thought this was cleanup duty, just a soft target in a bed he wouldn't wake up from. I watched her step out of the second SUV, clipboard in hand, still wearing the coat I bought her last winter, the one she said made her feel safe. She called them over, gesturing to the rough blueprint. I could make out her voice through the parabolic mic, confident, commanding. She was their asset handler, not bait. "There's a hallway entry here," she said, tapping the corner. "He usually sleeps facing the door. Silencer rounds to the head and heart. Leave the scene messy. Overturn drawers, cut a few wires, make it look like a robbery gone bad." One of the men laughed. "Easy money." She smiled. "Just don't get cocky. He's not as dumb as he looks." That much was true. They breached the southern wall first, exactly where I'd hoped they would. The pressure sensors were calibrated for exactly their weight. Once triggered, they'd start a 5-second silent delay to give them time to cluster. I waited. The first man moved fast, clearing the corner with his rifle up. He took 2 steps past the plywood support beam and dropped. Chest burst inward, silenced round, straight through the sternum. No echo, just meat hitting concrete. The second turned too sharply and triggered the buried flash. He reeled back into the nail bomb charge embedded in the utility sink. That one didn't kill him, It just tore his legs apart. His scream echoed like a kicked animal. Panic spread like gas. They scattered into cover, trying to identify the shooter. They didn't know I wasn't inside. I was above, outside, unreachable. Third and fourth dropped clean. 2 taps each. One hit the back of the head. The other caught his throat as he tried to shout orders. By then, she was screaming. "Hold formation. Identify the shooter. Move." But there was no formation. There was just chaos. I watched one of them try to climb the stairwell. Trigger wire. He didn't get past the second step before the supporting rebar snapped and dropped him onto the steel rods I'd planted below the floorboards. 6 down. Number 7 ran through a side passage and hit the ceramic shard tripwire. Not lethal, but it got him to drop his rifle. And that's when I took his kneecap out. I didn't kill him right away. I wanted him to look at her when he bled. 8 and 9 tried to make it to the van. I dropped them from behind before they even reached the hood. The thermal signatures lit up like flares on my scope. Predictable, linear, weak. The last one, number 10, was the one she called Sweetheart. I knew because he kept yelling her name like she'd save him. He tried to run, weaponless, calling for backup on a burner that wouldn't connect. He made it 12 feet before I stepped out from the shadows. I didn't shoot him. I stabbed him, just once, right under the ribcage, angled up. His breath hitched, and he fell to his knees. He looked up at her, choking, eyes wide with a betrayal he didn't have time to process. She caught him, tried to hold him up, blood pouring onto her jeans. "No, no, no, please," she whispered, pressing against his chest. I walked out into the open then, rifle slung across my back, the last of the charges already primed behind me. She looked up and froze. Her hands were soaked in his blood. Her face twisted, but it wasn't fear. It was shock, loss, maybe regret. "I trusted you," she gasped. I stared at her. My voice came colder than I expected. "I trusted you first." She reached for something. I didn't wait to see what. I slammed her down, cuffed her wrists behind her back, and yanked her to her feet. She screamed and kicked, but she was done. Her little army was done. There was no one left to save her. The timer was ticking. 3 minutes. The fake gas line I'd rigged to the lower level was already leaking. By the time anyone found this place, it would be a smoking crater with 10 unidentifiable corpses, and no trace of me. She was the only thing I left behind, and even that was just a loose end, waiting for transport. The debriefing room was sterile, windowless, and humming with that faint fluorescent buzz that always made my skin itch. A bureau seal hung on the wall like a warning instead of a symbol. 2 cameras in opposite corners, 1 mirrored glass panel. Probably 2 analysts and a shift commander behind it, watching me like I was the one under investigation. She sat across from me, wrists cuffed to the bolted table. She hadn't spoken since the ride in. No pleading, no rage, just silence, the kind that vibrates with things unsaid. My contact entered. Agent Mendez. We'd worked 2 operations together, one in Chicago, one in Tucson. Sharp, trusted, never asked questions he didn't need, answered. He gave me a nod and said, "We'll take it from here." I stood without looking at her, but I felt her eyes, not soft, not broken, just full of quiet hate. That was fine. That was fair. They were going to process her under Operation Glassveil, a deep probe into cartel infiltration networks using civilian assets to marry and compromise law enforcement officers. Turns out she wasn't just one woman who played me. She was one spoke in a much bigger wheel, a recruitment node, a handler, and if her messages were accurate, a gatekeeper for a target list 3 dozen names long. I was just a test run. Mendez clipped her chain, lifted her to her feet, and led her out without ceremony. She didn't look back. Neither did I. No one congratulated me. No commendation. That's how this job works. When you do it right, no one knows you were ever there. I signed the last of the documents and exited through the garage-level corridor. The morning sun hit like a knife to the eyes after hours underground. I took it anyway, blinking back the burn, and walked to the edge of the parking structure where my truck waited. Inside the glove box sat my phone. The real one. Still off. Still untouched since I'd initiated the contingency drop 3 nights ago. I didn't turn it on. Not yet. Instead, I drove east, past the edge of the city, past the perimeter of coverage, into the brushlands that no one patrolled anymore, where the roads cracked and faded, and the wind forgot to stop moving. I pulled off near mile marker 212 and hiked the last stretch. My gear was still stashed where I'd left it, under the hollowed-out tree, in a dry bag wrapped twice and taped against moisture. The rifle was broken down, clean, reassembled in minutes. My hands knew the rhythm like a prayer, one I hadn't said in years, but still remembered. I set up camp the way I used to on solo missions. Quiet, simple, efficient. No fire, no lights. Just a cold canteen and a flat patch of dirt beneath a dome of stars that didn't judge or ask why. And then I sat. No briefing, no adrenaline. Just the echoes of everything I didn't say. I pulled out a small notepad from the inner pocket of my jacket. No logos, no names, just blank pages I saved for truths I never spoke aloud. I took the pencil stub and wrote slowly, deliberately. I never needed vengeance. I just needed to be seen. I paused, then added, and now I've disappeared again, just how I like it. I tore the page out, folded it into thirds, and struck a match. The flame caught immediately, curling the paper like it flinched. I held it until the fire touched my fingertips. Then I dropped it into the dirt and watched the ash scatter into the breeze. There's a myth they tell in training, that people like me, deep covers, ghosts, can't ever really come back. We learn to fade, and eventually, we forget how to exist in the daylight. I used to think it was cynical. Now I know it's just a quiet kind of truth. I laid back, rifle beside me, eyes on the stars. Somewhere far off, she was in a cage. A real one this time. Processing, interrogations, declassification. She'd spend the rest of her life inside rooms like the one I left her in. And I wouldn't visit. I wouldn't even check the updates. Because this story wasn't about her anymore. It was about the silence that follows. The one I'd trained for, lived inside. That strange, peaceful hum that only exists when you're between targets, between covers, between ghosts. I stood just before dawn, shouldered my pack, and turned toward the hills. No one knew what I did. Not fully, not even the Bureau. And that was the point. Tomorrow would bring another name, another file, another face I'd have to become. But tonight, for just a few hours, I was nobody. And I liked it that way.